Hello everyone, you're watching the channel Stories of Our Life. Friends, make yourselves comfortable. I wish you to truly enjoy listening to this life story.
Ernesto stared intensely into the night outside the window, trembling with fear. In the outlines of the trees, he saw fantastical creatures that wanted to take him and his younger sister to their world. He jumped off the windowsill and rushed to the door to lock it securely. But someone from the other side beat him to it and forcefully pulled the door towards them. The boy screamed in terror, "Mom! Mama! Help me!" And as if in response to his plea, a familiar voice from afar began singing a popular song loudly and confidently. The song quickly filled the space, and the unseen villain trying to get into their home pulled the door once more and left. But the song didn't stop. It got closer to Ernesto, and he felt his mother's familiar warmth nearby. He longed to hug his mom, but he couldn't find her, only hearing her voice. "Don't be afraid, my dear son, Mama is with you. Sing like me, and no one will dare touch you." And the familiar song sounded even louder. Ernesto started singing along, but his voice kept breaking. However, his mom patted his shoulder and encouraged him. "Come on, Ernesto, be more confident, you can do it. The main thing is not to be afraid." He gathered all his strength and sang out. Instead of words of approval, Ernesto heard scolding directed at him. "Ernesto, have you completely lost your mind? What nonsense are you singing in the middle of the night?" Felicita loomed over him and started slapping him on the cheeks rather sensitively. "Wake up, sleepwalker. Not only do you do who knows what during the day, but now you also keep us awake at night." Her long hair tickled his nose, and the man sneezed a few times. This triggered an annoyed reaction from his discontented wife. "Of course, first, you sing, and now you have uncontrollable sneezing. Just what I needed, to catch some infection from you." Lately, Ernesto had been quite annoyed by his wife's arrogance. He took the opportunity to put her down. "Felicita, in any case, you risk catching something from me because we sleep together, which ensures the closest contact. Only a spacesuit can save you." Felicita responded with insults. "Your flat jokes only emphasize the poverty of your mind." It was a clear hint at her husband's peasant origin. The sweet dreams had completely evaporated, and the man sat up in bed. He asked his wife, "Felicita, you are undoubtedly a bright intellectual, but you clearly have problems with grammar. Stupidity and intelligence are practically synonymous, so there's no need to use them in the same sentence." The woman jumped out of bed. "You're like a philologist. It would be one thing if it weren't for you, my dear, you'd still be languishing by the conveyor if not for my dad's patronage. Dear, you made a mistake again. I worked with different automobile parts, and I had no time to languish, as you carelessly put it. In general, let me give you some advice for the future. Before using specific terms, at least superficially study their meaning." Felicita rudely snatched the blanket from him. "Go to hell with your advice. I can't understand how I couldn't see you for the primitive creature you are. You pretended to be so in love, but in reality, you didn't need me, you needed my dad's protection." Felicita looked comically vulnerable in her anger, but the situation wasn't in her favor. For several years of living together, Ernesto had learned to cope with her outbursts of aggression. Calmly but firmly, he ordered, "Enough of your anger, give me back the blanket. I'm cold." "Oh, you're freezing. Poor thing. You'll warm up in your office. Although, in principle, you're a perpetual tenant in this house, and there's nothing of your own here." He knew that his calmness most irritated her, so he asked her with icy composure, "Felicita, what are you trying to achieve? If you're not satisfied with me, find another husband. I wouldn't even mind, but there's no need to create a scandal in the middle of the night." Still clutching the blanket to her chest, Felicita muttered through her teeth, "It seems you have memory problems. You were the one singing in the middle of the night and woke me up. A good song, people enjoy singing it. My mother loves it very much. She appeared in my dream. Everything was so real, even the horror from such piercing reality." Felicita was tired of standing with the blanket in her hands and sat down next to her husband. A new topic completely absorbed her, and she expressed her opinion on it. They say such dreams always foretell something. I should look it up on the internet. What does such nonsense mean for you? I'll check it tomorrow. Let's get back to bed. You'll be late for work soon. The second invitation was not needed, and the woman dove under the warm blanket. She curled up, and after a few minutes, her steady breathing could be heard. Ernesto gently kissed his wife on the forehead and whispered softly, "You're still the same girl, even though you try to play the part of a sophisticated lady." Felicita mumbled something indistinct and snuggled closer to her husband. Ernesto, no matter how hard he tried, couldn't fall asleep that night. He waited for the alarm clock to ring, thinking about the dream that had disturbed his consciousness. He had long cut off almost all ties with his relatives since they were not a part of his new life. But he felt no regret or guilt about it. The artificial barrier he had erected allowed him to forget the shame and humiliation he had experienced in his childhood. Even then, as a teenager, he blamed his biological mother as the main culprit for all his woes. Later, when Ernesto managed to improve his life, he simply blocked out his own memories. This method helped him escape from the past. Only occasionally, in chaotic dreams, fragments of distant events would resurface, but he had never experienced such vivid, realistic visions before. The electronic ringtone abruptly interrupted his thoughts. Ernesto realized he had inadvertently dozed off. His head felt heavy, and he silently scolded himself for being so susceptible. This nonsense has made me forget. I'm only winding myself up even more. I also ended up arguing with Felicita over this trivial matter. To clear his mind, he stood under a cold shower. The cold streams hit his body, filling him with fresh energy. After the shower, Ernesto felt much better. He quickly made omelette with ham and coffee. Setting the plates and cups on a tray, he headed to the bedroom. "My love, wake up." A voice from under the blanket said, "I prefer this song. I decided to compensate you for the sleepless night and made breakfast myself. I don't feel like getting up. You'll have to help me." The man tugged at the edge of the blanket. "Ernesto, that's cruel of you. Give me a minute to snuggle. By the way, it's already 8:30, and you might be late for work. Eat your breakfast, and then you have 10 minutes to get ready, as I have an important meeting at 8:15. Felicita looked at her husband with a smirk but didn't say anything. Ernesto knew his wife too well to believe in her sudden compliance. When she got into the car, he casually asked, "What did you want to tell me?" Felicita suddenly shouted, scaring her husband. "Ernesto, I remembered." "Felicita, is it okay to scream like that? I'm driving." "What did you remember?" "Everything is correct. I thought about it once before in my life." "It's true, I spoil you often." "Ernesto, you ruined everything again. I won't say another word to you." For about 5 minutes, the woman pretended to be offended. But at some point, she forgot about it and screamed again, "Yes, I remembered. When you came to the bedroom with the tray, I thought I had seen a similar scene in my life before. That's right, I often indulge you." "Ernesto, again, you ruined everything. I won't say another word to you." A bit later, Felicita's voice became calmer. "Ernesto, I thought that the kimono combined with a silver tray suits you oddly. By the way, my friends from the music school think you come from an affluent family. They're absolutely thrilled with your refined manners. If they knew where I dug you up from, they'd definitely faint." The woman didn't notice how her husband's fingertips turned white. "Felicita, do you enjoy reminding me of my background? Besides, I came to this city on my own, without any external help, and got into college myself," he said. The woman quickly changed her expression, now embodying innocence. "Ernesto, don't be angry. It was unintentional. I wanted to compliment you, like saying you're extraordinary. That's what I fell in love with," she explained. She closed her eyes and puckered her lips. "Kiss you, I'm going," Felicita said, after their customary peck. With grace, Felicita elegantly slipped out of the car. Ernesto watched for a while as his wife confidently made her way to the music school building, where she taught music theory. He thought admirably, yes, my Felicita knows how to present herself in the best light. No one can take that away from her. Throughout the journey to his office, he thought about his spouse and their family life. However, the moment Ernesto stepped into the office, all his thoughts shifted to work. The day flew by unnoticed, and he returned home in a good mood. Near the residential complex, where they recently bought an apartment, there was a paid parking lot. Ernesto decided to leave his car there because he had to leave early in the morning for some business in a neighboring region. Winter brought early darkness to the city by 5 o'clock. Therefore, he didn't immediately notice a female figure near the entrance. Ernesto slowly entered the code on the massive doors and was about to step into the foyer when a familiar voice called out from the street. Ernesto? Surprised, he turned around. Mom? I didn't even notice you. Michaela took a few steps towards him. I've been waiting here for you for a while, even got a bit cold. I saw your Felicita, but she passed by without recognizing me, I suppose, she said. The woman looked hopefully at her son, but he responded casually, okay, we'll talk at home. Go ahead, Mom. There were no hugs or kisses, typical of close encounters. Ernesto let his mother go first and followed her up the stairs. Michaela struggled with every step and kept sobbing. Ernesto avoided making eye contact with her, desperately wondering why she had come here. With a note of tragedy in her voice, Michaela conveyed, Ernesto, I wouldn't have bothered you, but I've had a tragedy. Our house almost burned down. I have nowhere else to go. The news stunned Ernesto. How did it catch fire? There was a short circuit, the wiring was old. I know nothing about such things. There had been sparks in that place before, but this time, as I was going to the post office to send some money to Samantha, it's hard for her to raise Francis alone, and she has no one to help. I saw a column of smoke over my house. It shattered me inside. The elevator jerked, and the doors creaked open. Ernesto was completely bewildered and rushed to leave the elevator first. Michaela couldn't exit in time, and the doors closed on her. Annoyed, her son said, Mom, you need to be more careful. By the way, most accidents happen because of the carelessness of the victims themselves. Thank you, my dear. You're so supportive, Michaela replied, feeling hurt, but Ernesto didn't even apologize. He was still frantically trying to figure out what to do in this situation. Upon unlocking the door to his apartment, Ernesto said, Mom, just sit here and rest for a while, and I'll talk to Felicita. And why is that? Don't you have any say in this house? Michaela asked. Seems like it. You know, this apartment was a gift from her father, Ernesto replied. Michaela sat on the edge of a shoe rack, and her son headed to the kitchen, where Felicita was clattering dishes. As he entered, she mockingly remarked, Seems like your mommy's visit was just a premonition. I'm amazed at our simple rural compatriots. How they can calmly come down on you without any warning. Probably here to ask for money. No, Felicita. It's not about that. My mother lost her home, our house burned down, Ernesto said. I hope you're not planning to have her stay with us? I'm categorically against it, Felicita replied. Ernesto raised his voice, Felicita, how can you? She's my mother. So what? She's your mother, not mine. Ernesto was taken aback by his wife's cynicism but had no time to address it as Michaela was waiting patiently in the hallway for even the most basic hospitality. He decided to approach the situation differently. Felicita, can't my mother stay overnight at least? I can't leave her out on the streets for the night. Ernesto, you seem to have forgotten that this is my apartment, and I won't turn it into a shelter for the needy and unfortunate. Felicita, watch your words. Show some respect for my mother. I couldn't care less about your family and their problems. Send your mother to a hotel, and the problem will be solved. Here's some money, it should be enough for a hotel and the return trip. Ernesto stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door loudly. He tried to smile encouragingly at his mother but stumbled upon her stern gaze. Ernesto, I heard everything. You don't need to explain. With some difficulty, Michaela got up from the shoe rack, grabbed her bags, and at that moment, Felicita stepped out of the kitchen, not bothering with pleasantries. Mommy, there's no need to act like a victim here. You'd be better off thinking about your son. Just your appearance alone is compromising Ernesto. Another mother in your place would have thought 100 times before showing up. And think whatever you want about me, but I'm really not turning my apartment into a transit center or a shelter. Here's some money for you, it should cover the hotel and the way back. Felicita extended several $100 bills to her mother-in-law, but she crudely pushed her hand away. I don't need your money. Michaela kicked open the partially open front door and left her daughter-in-law's apartment forever. She could hear her son trying to justify himself to his wife, while she scolded him loudly. For about 5 minutes, the couple argued heatedly, and when tempers cooled down, Ernesto rushed after his mother. However, Michaela was nowhere to be seen. He searched the entire yard, looked at the playground, and spent half an hour waiting at the bus stop in the hope that his mother would appear. Just in case, he checked the nearest market, but Michaela was nowhere to be found. The sudden visit from his mother and the subsequent argument with his wife took away any desire Ernesto had to continue searching. To reassure himself, he said out loud, "Perhaps she went home. I'll call her tomorrow and find out how she solved her housing problem." Ernesto seemed to forget the reason that brought his mother to seek his help. He felt no emotional connection, as he wasn't particularly concerned about the fate of the woman to whom he owed his life. Ernesto's first conscious memory was related to his early childhood. The village where he was unfortunate enough to be born was something between a small town and a village. In one part of the settlement, 2 microdistricts had grown together, featuring modern 5-story buildings, a school, a kindergarten, and numerous shops. The old part mostly consisted of private houses. The inhabitants of the private sector, for the most part, kept birds and livestock, as subsistence farming helped them survive during the difficult years of restructuring and the subsequent crisis. However, Michaela did not follow the common traditions, as she spent day and night working at the farm. Ernesto's grandmother, Rosalia, often scolded her. "Michaela, you're not like normal people. At least get a couple of hens and a rooster. Your little boy should have fresh eggs, he looks sickly." But Michaela was not one to be lost for words. She always had a worthy answer ready for such remarks, replying something like, "Instead of trying to teach me something, why don't you get a rooster and some hens yourself? Then, you could bring fresh eggs to your only grandson for breakfast." "But I'm not in good health. I've already worked hard in my life." "Mom, don't pretend. You're not even 50 yet. Why are you labeling yourself as an old woman prematurely? Besides, even a healthy woman couldn't handle playing cards with the neighbors until midnight. But I understand, Mom, that you go to such sacrifices not just for the sake of entertainment." "What do you mean by hints?" Rosalia tried to demonstrate the highest degree of indignation, but she managed to do it only halfway convincingly. At this point, it's worth mentioning that playing poker was a favorite hobby at that time. Rosalia had a passionate nature and became addicted to this game earlier than expected. The games were usually held in one of the club members' houses, where enthusiasts of such games gathered. A match was considered finished when one of the players received the highest-ranking epaulets. The bank, which the lucky one could seize at the end of the round, added to the participants' interest. Michaela accidentally found out about her mother's passion. Her best friend Valentina, with whom she also worked on the farm, had some strained relations with her own mother and once confided, "Michaela, it's not just you who has this problem. My mom is also an ardent fan of this game. It would be fine, but she refuses to sit down with Bruna. In this regard, you're luckier, as Rosalia keeps an eye on Ernesto." Valentina was well aware of the peculiarities of the gatherings of the older generation, and told her friend that respectable citizens played for money. "Michaela, let them go crazy if they want, but I'm afraid the police might find out what the old folks are up to." "Believe me, Valentina, no one cares about our mother's entertainment." The friends did not return to this topic until an extraordinary incident occurred. The club's meetings usually took place at the home of Eleonora, Michaela's neighbor. This woman was notorious for her love of money, so she kept ducks, geese, rabbits, and other animals on her property. One day, during a regular game session, Rosalia had to take a break for a natural necessity. When she headed to the bathroom, she was spotted by Ernesto, whom his grandmother had ordered to play in her yard. The 3-year-old boy set aside his toys and ran to the neighboring yard, shouting, "Grandma, play with me." But Rosalia's patience was running thin. She replied, "Ernesto, play here, I'll come in a moment." A little boy waited for his grandmother in the yard, but unexpectedly, he caught the attention of a goose. This goose stood out not only for its unreasonable behavior but also for its large size. The goose picked up speed and charged at the child, knocking him to the ground. The boy screamed in terror, prompting his grandmother, Rosalia, to rush out of the house. Rosalia shouted, "Hey, you rascal! Let go of the child." She grabbed the goose by its neck and forcefully hit it against the fence. The defeated foe emitted a series of throaty sounds and went quiet. The house's owner came running out, exclaiming, "Rosalia, what have you done? Why did you hurt my Carl like that? How will the flock survive without its leader?" It took a moment for the grandmother to realize that Carl was the unpleasant goose that had attacked her grandson. She lifted the bewildered boy from the ground, shaking him, but the boy just looked around in a daze and didn't even cry. Rosalia became worried for her grandchild. "Eleonora, I don't care about your Carl. Your goose terrified my grandson to death. Ernesto, say something to Grandma." But the child remained silent. Instead of showing sympathy and helping her friend, the owner of the yard scolded the 3-year-old boy. "Ernesto, why did you come into my yard? You should have played at home." Rosalia rudely pushed the neighbor away. "Don't you dare shout at my grandson." She shouted to the whole street, "I don't give a darn about your kid. The goose is more important to me. Who will compensate me for the losses now? Where else will I find such a goose?" Grandma Eleonora burst into tears and rushed to the fallen goose. Apparently, the owner's tears had an invigorating effect on the goose. It first twitched and then got up, wobbling towards 2 female geese and their goslings, who patiently waited near the shed for their leader's return. The neighbor beamed with happiness, and Rosalia, grabbing her grandson, walked away from the yard. "Eleonora, you're a fool, and your goose is nasty. I won't come back again." "I don't care," replied Eleonora. Some of the closest neighbors had already gathered near the yard and were delighting in the vibrant scene of the 2 friends' quarrel. After this incident, the elderly women carefully avoided each other. Carl, the gander, quickly recovered after the stress he went through. However, the attack left its mark on little Ernesto. By the evening, the boy came back to his senses, but when he started talking, his grandmother gasped. "Oh no. He's stuttering now. Ernesto, Michaela will be furious." Of course, the young mother, upon learning about the distressing incident, attacked Rosalia. "Mama, how can you trust the child after this?" Michaela said, but her mother shifted the blame onto her daughter. "I didn't want to be a nanny. I can't take care of the child. Maybe you should put him in daycare." Michaela considered this advice reasonable, but Ernesto's stuttering worsened, so she had to take him to the neighboring village to visit her grandmother, who knew how to cure children's fears. In Ernesto's memory, an ancient old woman, much like Baba Yaga, measured him with a string and then cut off a lock of his hair. She handed the string and hair to Michaela, instructing her to hide them in the doorway at home while reciting calming words. This folk remedy seemed to work for the child, as Ernesto soon started speaking normally again. However, his fear of geese remained with him for life. After fully recovering, Michaela enrolled her son in a daycare. Meanwhile, Bruna, Valentina's daughter, had settled into their lives. It became a significant event for both women. Single mothers believed that fate itself suggested the right decisions for their future lives. Valentina's aunt especially loved to fantasize about this idea. "Michaela, imagine our children growing up and getting married. Then we will truly become relatives, taking care of our grandchildren together." Michaela was more grounded in reality and secretly wished her son a more successful future with a wealthy bride. However, she rarely shared her plans with her friend. She didn't tell Valentina about her secret affair with a young agronomist, who had been sent to their farm to exchange experiences. Michaela fell in love with the intelligent graduate from the agricultural academy at first sight. Gustavo was 4 years younger than her, but this fact hardly bothered the yearning woman. In the management of the agricultural enterprise, which was in its final months, they didn't know where to accommodate the young specialist. And the management turned to Michaela with a request. Michaela, you have a big house, and you live alone. Take in the young man for a couple of months. We'll give you a bonus. Michaela agreed immediately. Let him stay, but no parties. Michaela, Gustavo is a responsible family man. His wife is pregnant. Michaela allocated a separate room for the lodger, where he lived quietly for 4 months. When the young specialist gained experience, he went to his wife, who gave birth to their son. Shortly after his departure, Michaela noticed her belly growing rapidly. Ernesto was the first to notice that something was wrong with his mom, but at 5.5 years old, he didn't fully understand and decided to share his concerns with his grandmother. Grandma, Mom is sick. We need to save her urgently. Rosalia hugged her grandson and kissed him on the forehead. You little storyteller. How did you come up with the idea that Mom is sick? She doesn't even cough. Ernesto widened his eyes. Grandma, haven't you noticed that Mom's belly has become really big? Maybe she has big parasites in her stomach. They told us at kindergarten that we need to wash our hands. Maybe Mom forgot to wash her hands, and now she has worms. While Ernesto was recounting his version, his grandmother sat with her mouth open, not even blinking. Then she remained silent for a very long time. Unaware of all this, Michaela returned home late in the evening, and her mother met her at the doorstep with a broom in her hand. Rosalia started sweeping Michaela's back and said, "You disgrace. You got pregnant again." Michaela weakly defended herself. Mom, calm down. This is my life. You yourself are no saint, you lived your whole life as a single woman. Don't you dare reproach me. I have a stamp in my passport, and I gave birth to you from a legal husband. Ernesto couldn't understand anything from this argument. He huddled in a corner and tried not to miss a word. At the end of the argument, both women embraced and cried, cursing their unhappy fate. In the autumn, Ernesto's little sister Samantha was born. At first, the little girl didn't appeal to the boy because she was too small and couldn't talk. Michaela tried several times to awaken sympathy for the younger sister in her elder son, but he declared, I won't bother with her. Mom, why do we need her? Better give her to someone else. Ernesto, you can't say that. Samantha is your little sister, and you should protect her. I don't want to. I'll protect Bruna instead because I like her more, and we agreed that when we go to school, we'll sit at the same desk. Ernesto and Bruna ended up in a class where children from well-off families studied. Such an imbalance occurred because their mothers applied for school enrollment late. The most surprising thing about this skewed distribution was that their small town had many new Italians who managed to make a fortune in a few years. The teacher's attitude towards children in the regular elite classes was also quite different. Therefore, Valentina and Michaela considered themselves lucky. Valentina was especially happy about this stroke of luck. Michaela, God willing, our kids will also make something of themselves in such an environment. Don't get your hopes up. Our kids, just like us, carry the mark of being common folks. Of course, it's possible to rise to the top, but it's very difficult. And it's not certain that they won't transfer our little ones to another class. Michaela was not mistaken in her predictions. Throughout the first year, Ernesto and Bruna sat at the very back of the classroom. However, this arrangement suited them just fine because they could quietly do whatever came to mind during lessons. For example, Bruna would draw girls in bright dresses, while Ernesto molded figurines from clay. But all secrets can become public in an instant. One day, at the very end of the school year, their observant teacher exposed them. However, the young teacher forgot that her words would greatly impact her students' future. Due to inexperience or perhaps intentionally, she publicly humiliated the mischievous pair. Look, everyone, see what Ernesto and Bruna are doing during the lesson. One is drawing dolls, the other is making figurines from clay. While we're studying how to write properly. I guess Ernesto and Bruna are child prodigies and have already mastered all the sciences. The teacher directed her question at the guilty first graders, but they didn't sense any trap. Bruna confidently stepped forward before the class and said, I learned to read and count when I was 4 years old. I've been reading fairy tales on my own for a long time because my mom doesn't have time. She's always working. The teacher asked further, and who taught you all these things, sweetie? My mom did. She's very smart and knows everything. Ernesto also wanted to assert himself, so he joined his friend. My mom knows everything too. She's smart, and my dad used to ride tanks. The classmates chuckled softly. However, the teacher burst into laughter so hard that the windows rattled. Fantasizers. Everyone knows that both your moms work on the farm. The classroom filled with children's laughter. The teacher continued, and you, Ernesto, shouldn't lie so confidently. Your mom isn't smart, and you don't have a dad, never had one. The boy felt the mocking gazes of his classmates. He didn't want to, but tears welled up in his eyes, and Ernesto screamed at the teacher in a fit of rage. You're all liars. All teachers are kind, but you're mean. Perhaps the trauma he experienced in early childhood affected his current state, and his hands and legs started trembling. The teacher completely lost her composure and nervously squeaked, Kids, run to the staff room, get someone. One of the little ones ran to the staff room, and in less than a minute, some older teachers arrived to help. The young teacher explained the situation, stumbling over her words, but unexpectedly, Bruna, whom everyone had forgotten, interrupted. Donatella, why are you lying? It was all completely different. You said bad things about Ernesto and his mom, and he got upset. The girl briefly recounted the unfolding drama in the classroom. They took Ernesto to the medical room, where the nurse quickly calmed the boy down. Surprisingly, no pills or injections were needed, kind words were enough. By that time, the situation had been resolved, but Michaela arrived at the school. What happened to my son? The woman was on the verge of a nervous breakdown and demanded explanations from the teachers, but they remained silent, exchanging glances. Bruna then decided to inform her friend's mother about how the teacher had treated her son. The unhappy mother's mood quickly turned into anger. Oh, that's what happened. Thanks, Bruna. Michaela sought out the culprit of the incident. By the time she reached the young teacher, Donatella, she was trying to escape through a side exit. However, Michaela had attended this school herself and knew the ins and outs of the building. She caught the teacher just before she could leave and gave her a good shake. Woman, nobody gave you the right to raise your hands. You think you've become a teacher and can do whatever comes to your mind? No, it won't work like that. Remember, you'll be the one having a seizure if you ever humiliate my child again. Do you understand me? Donatella was experiencing a visceral fear at that moment, so she was only mumbling something incoherent. However, behind the scenes, a group of high school students was eagerly observing from around the corner. The next day, the hot news spread throughout the village, and the school was shaken by a scandal. Of course, the incident could have been resolved if it hadn't involved first graders. Therefore, the young teacher had to resign, and Ernesto and Bruna were transferred to another first-grade class with the mutual agreement of their mothers. Elisa took charge of them, a very kind teacher with extensive experience. But their relationship with classmates did not improve. In the new class, the students deliberately kept their distance from the newcomers, but Ernesto and Bruna did not despair and enjoyed each other's company. Valentina watched the children with affection and often told her friend, "Listen, Michaela, I look at our school kids, and they increasingly remind me of a sweet couple from an advertisement." Michaela, being more practical, had a less enthusiastic view of children's friendship. Valentina, don't get too excited. When everyone around is ignoring them, our children have no choice but to stick together. Michaela, what's wrong with that? I think there's something charming about it. After all kids grow up someday and start their own families. And our kids won't have to look for a partner because fate has already taken care of that. Valentina, don't jump to conclusions. We don't know how life will unfold. And excuse me, but I don't see anything positive if everything happens exactly as you predict. Agreeing silently, the friends avoided discussing the topic further. But the childhood friendship between Bruna and Ernesto grew stronger day by day. Throughout their school years, they never had a single argument, but after graduation, they had a serious disagreement. Ernesto was obsessed with technology, while Bruna wanted them to attend veterinary college together. Bruna passionately defended her plan. Ernesto, just think about it. In our situation, it's the most reasonable option. I want to go to college too, but my mom can't afford it. And your family situation isn't any better, with your younger sister growing up. Eventually, we can get a high school education and then go to university. That's what most people do. But Ernesto wasn't convinced by her fiery speech. Bruna, you explain it all well, but the flaw in your plan is that 3 years will be wasted. You can do as you wish, but I'm going to apply to college right away. And sorry, but veterinary studies are not for me. To this, Bruna replied dramatically, it's your choice. And Bruna turned around and left the cafe, where the couple liked to hang out in the evenings. Due to the emerging disagreements, the relationship between the young people soured for a while. They not only stopped seeing each other but also stopped calling. Bruna submitted her documents to veterinary college, where there was some competition. Ernesto, however, faced less fortunate circumstances. He missed a few points, which meant he didn't qualify for a scholarship. He returned home with a heavy heart. Michaela tried to console her son. Don't be upset. You can work for a year and try again. Mom, what are you saying? If I delay any further, I'll get drafted into the army. It's not a big deal. Everyone serves. It's every decent man's duty. Mom, please, I don't want that. And why was I so unlucky? Why was I born into a poor family? Michaela was shocked by his words. Ernesto, can you say such things? I live my life for you and Samantha. I work day and night for you both. The boy asked his mother, and what have you achieved with all your hard work? So you want to do nothing and have everything? Yes, I do, and I don't see anything wrong with that. If we had money, I could go to a private college. After all, I have a good passing grade. Michaela thought long and hard. She tried to find a solution to the difficult problem all day. Various options came to her mind, but none of them seemed suitable. For the first time in her life, she decided to seek advice from her mother. Rosalia listened carefully to her daughter's dilemma. The money you need is right under your feet. Michaela raised her eyes in surprise, but just in case, she looked down at her feet. Mom, are you feeling okay? I didn't get much sleep. We were playing cards until 2 in the morning yesterday. But it wasn't my day. I lost. Oh my God, are you telling me you have nothing better to do? Yes. Do you know how awful it is to be alone in these 4 walls? I wander from corner to corner all day long. That's why I thought, Michaela, I could sell my house and move in with you. The money can go towards your son's education. The elderly woman looked hopefully at her daughter. Michaela didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mom, I've suggested you move in with me 100 times. But you always refused. Mom, you can't deny that. I just don't understand you anymore. I didn't want to before, but times have changed. I just don't know how much I can get for my house. Michaela didn't walk home, she flew. From the threshold, she first sang a verse of her favorite song. Ernesto already knew that his mother sang this song only when she was in a good mood. Moreover, after the musical prelude, the main part of the program should follow, and he was not mistaken. After the song, Michaela solemnly announced, "Son, you can apply for paid education if it's not too late." Ernesto couldn't believe his ears. "Mom, but you just said recently that we don't have money." The woman winked cunningly at her son. "A sponsor suddenly appeared in the form of your grandmother. Grandma decided to sell her house." The boy didn't even finish listening, he started dancing in a wild celebration. "Great, well done, Grandma. I'll be indebted to her for life." But the joy of the young man was suddenly interrupted by a warning from his mother. "Ernesto, don't think that all the money is for you. We'll split the amount in half. Samantha is growing up, she will also need to study." With the most important thing said, Michaela went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. She didn't see the anger on her son's face. When his mother left the room, he hissed, Samantha, Samantha, everything is for Samantha just because she's the younger one. Okay, I'll endure this." A buyer for Rosalia's house was quickly found, not without the help of omnipresent Valentina. After receiving the down payment, the grandmother immediately gave the money to her grandson. Ernesto went to the city to submit his documents to the university. The admissions committee somewhat disapprovingly remarked, "Young man, why did you wait until the last minute?" Ernesto replied without hesitation, "There was no money." The woman asked sarcastically, "And then it fell from the sky, or maybe you were searching for a treasure so desperately wanted to study?" "Something like that. My grandmother sold her house." The not-so-young woman in glasses stared at the young man. "Oh, what selflessness. You should carry your grandmother on your shoulders. Try to live up to her expectations." Ernesto promised this compassionate woman to show his best side. Upon returning home, the young man decided that it was time to restore normal relations with Bruna, and the most convenient occasion for this was a joint trip to the place of further education. They agreed to meet at the train station and hopped into the same train carriage. However, after several weeks of separation, the young people had learned to do without each other, so the conversation between them didn't flow naturally. Ernesto enthusiastically told the girl about his grandmother's heroic act, but Bruna didn't even smile. For almost the entire 2-hour journey, she only replied with a yes or no. She had her own thoughts. They said goodbye at the bus stop. The young man asked, "Bruna, don't disappear. Call more often." She smiled, trying to make her smile as indifferent as possible. "Ernesto, it's customary for the guy to call first. Why should I bother you? Maybe you'll find a girlfriend?" The bus departed from the stop, and the young man tried to understand the meaning behind her last words. Perhaps Bruna is just jealous of me. This thought amused him and, at the same time, elevated his own significance. Until that day, Ernesto had never thought about what might happen to their relationship. Bruna had been a good friend. She never let him down and always kept her promises, but that all remained in childhood. Now Ernesto wanted to know if he truly loved Bruna or if their relationship was still just a childhood friendship. The boy didn't know that at the same moment, on her way to the dormitory, Bruna was also trying to answer the question of whether they should remain friends, or if their relationship should take a completely different turn. However, as often happens, life itself put everything in its place. In the first 6 months, the young people met almost every week when they went to the village. They chatted on the train about various topics, but each carefully avoided discussing their personal lives. Only once, Bruna casually asked, "Are there any girls in your group?" Ernesto laughed. "What are you talking about? It's a technical university, and girls aren't interested in gadgets. There are probably only girls in your veterinary academy." The girl coyly looked away. "Ernesto, why do you mock me like that? I'm studying at college, and after graduation, I'll most likely find a job at some veterinary clinic." "So, you'll end up going to work at your mother's farm?" Bruna sighed. "Yeah, but you know what? I don't regret it at all. The most surprising thing is that in our college, there are other ordinary girls and guys too. So, there are still guys after all? Yep. Don't think that college is a waste of time. We have various interesting events. In general, everything is fascinating there. Maybe someday you'll invite me? I should know who you're friends with, right? At the first convenient opportunity, I'll definitely invite you. But such an opportunity didn't present itself anytime soon. Ernesto was fully immersed in his studies. Moreover, he had to work as a simple laborer at the factory in the evenings to earn some money for clothes and other necessary things. Bruna also found an additional way to earn money. She got a job in a dog grooming salon with the help of an acquaintance. When Ernesto learned about his friend's unusual occupation, he laughed for a long time. Bruna, maybe in the future, you'll open your own shop and make fashionable clothes for cats, dogs, and other animals? Don't laugh. To your information, it's a very profitable business today. For example, my boss started by providing grooming services to the pets of her friends. Then these friends told other acquaintances about the unique craftsman. In short, within 6 months, she had more clients than she could handle. And just a year after starting, she had her own workshop. Well, everyone goes crazy in their own way. Some buy expensive cars, while others spend a fortune on pedigreed dogs. I don't even know what you, Bruna, will choose when we get married. This statement was unexpected. She tried to sound indifferent, but her trembling voice gave away her excitement. What makes you think that we'll get married? Everything is heading in that direction. There has to be some logical continuation or conclusion to our friendship. I guess there should be. But I haven't thought about it yet. You still have time to think. Bruna laughed. Ernesto, did you just propose to me? Did I understand you correctly? Well, yes. But you're still studying, and you have more studying ahead. If you didn't know before today, let me tell you a terrible secret. Statistics show that students get married even more often than mature adults. Amazing. I've never heard of that before. You still have a lot to learn, and I have to teach you everything. After that, they shared a kiss. The couple rejoiced in this new stage of life and, not wanting to waste precious days, they decided to live together. Ernesto found an affordable option after a brief search, a small room in an old apartment building. The landlady handed them the keys without many questions but warned them, you only have a small room at your disposal. I currently live with my daughter, but I'll occasionally show up. Behave quietly so that the neighbors don't complain about me. Ernesto reassured the old lady. Don't worry, we are poor students. We'll get married soon, so noisy parties are not part of our plans. Although Ernesto often reminded Bruna about their impending wedding, he didn't intend to legalize their relationship so quickly. Thus, Bruna had no choice but to be patient and wait. She never even considered the possibility that her beloved could deceive her. But a year passed, and their situation didn't progress. Michaela changed everything. From an unknown source, she learned that the children were living together. When Ernesto visited her, she asked, "Do you take me for a fool? How much longer do you and Bruna plan to hide?" Ernesto put on an innocent face. "Mom, what are you talking about?" The woman raised her voice. "Don't pretend. Ernesto, I'm your mother, and I won't allow you to ruin the life of my best friend's daughter." The young man realized that there was no turning back. He hugged his mother by the shoulders. "Mom, don't worry, everything will be fine with us. Bruna and I will definitely get married, just a little later. I don't like this situation. First, you should have had a wedding, and then lived together. And you two are doing it the other way around. Mom, times change, and so do customs. Today, many couples live together without getting married, and even have children." Michaela distanced herself from her son. She spoke passionately and convincingly. "Absolutely not. I don't want you to treat Bruna the way your father treated me. I won't allow you to ruin that girl's life." Ernesto was surprised by his mother's reaction. "Mom, why are you so upset?" I don't want my son to add to the ranks of single mothers. I want you to have everything like normal people do. Rosalia spoke from a distant corner of the room. Ernesto, listen to your mother. She's right. Every respectable man should take responsibility for his actions. And now, you're fully responsible for Bruna's fate. The young man felt pressured from both sides and gave in. All right. We'll submit the application tomorrow. Bruna and I wanted to finish our studies first and then have the wedding. But since you insist, we'll expedite the process. All parties were content with the compromise. As promised, Ernesto called Bruna the next day. The chosen registration date coincided with Bruna's completion of her studies, which delighted her. But the bride's joy was premature. She didn't yet know the shame she would have to endure on the day that was supposed to be the brightest and happiest. Michaela watched the big clock hands on the wall above the waiting room's entrance, which seemed to stop at the moment when her son essentially kicked her out of the house. She didn't know where to go or how to spend the night. On some impulse, she headed straight for the bus stop and got into the first bus that stopped. The driver asked, "Where are you going, ma'am?" She countered with a question, "And where are you going?" The driver was surprised. Strange people. They get on the bus without knowing the route. "Ma'am, the final stop is the station." "Yes, that's right. I need to go to the station." She handed over the money for the ticket. She didn't want to get into a discussion with the driver, who was clearly bored. She went to the back of the bus and sat there until the end of the line. The entire bus journey and then at the station, her mind revolved around one thought: what to do next. Michaela hadn't expected her son to reject her outright. After the fire that happened the day before, the neighbors were ready to offer her a corner to stay, but she declined their help. "I'll go to my son. He and his fiancée recently bought a new apartment, a whopping 120 square meters. I hope they'll take me in," she thought. But her hopes were soon shattered. Of course, she could return to the village and knock on any neighbor's door. However, what would people say when they find out that Ernesto threw his own mother out? A heartbroken cry escaped her chest. "Why did I sell my grandmother's house?" she muttered. The woman sitting next to her looked scared. "What did you say? Are you okay?" "Nothing, everything's fine. It just slipped out involuntarily." The woman looked at her with concern and quickly moved to another seat. Michaela thought, people are already avoiding me. What's next? This question had crossed her mind many times, and now, even in death, it haunted Rosalia after the failed wedding of her son. Both families had been preparing for the event for 2 months. The mothers of the bride and groom wanted the celebration to be grand. Valentina was particularly ambitious in this regard. "Michaela, let everyone envy the grandeur of our children's wedding," she would say. Although Michaela was used to Valentina's statements like this, she asked with concern, "Valentina, just tell me your plan already." Her friend replied cheerfully, "In short, I hired real artists." "Valentina, but that's expensive." "Michaela, everything is strictly according to the contract and established rates. And as for the finances, don't worry about that. I've taken care of it. I got a loan because we can't do without one anyway. There are so many things the bride needs. The dress, the hairstyle, and all the other attributes." "Valentina, where will we get so much money from? You have savings from selling the house, don't you? We can borrow from there, and then we'll pay it all back." "Valentina, when will we pay it back? Samantha will start university next year. The girl dreams of becoming a teacher. I can't deceive her hopes. Goals can easily change. And in the end, it's our children's wedding, and both of us must do everything to make it memorable." Indeed, the whole village discussed the wedding that never took place for many years. The happy bride, along with 20 of her classmates, arrived in the village just 2 hours before the ceremony. Valentina immediately confronted her daughter. "Bruna, how can you be so irresponsibly about your own wedding?" "Mom, don't be mad. We were delayed at college. There was a formal event, and then they organized a dessert table for us. So we had to stay a bit longer. And don't worry about my hairstyle, my friends will do my hair and makeup. The bride's friends immediately got to work. Within an hour, Bruna was shining with youthful beauty. She twirled in front of a large mirror, admiring her reflection. Ernesto will be amazed when he sees me. By the way, has he shown up yet? Not yet. He's probably getting ready too. At that moment, Valentina wasn't feeling worried, but just in case, she called her friend. Michaela, how's our groom doing? Bruna is already ready. Michaela remained silent, and Valentina thought there was a problem with the connection. She blew into the receiver. Hello, Michaela, can you hear me? Valentina, don't shout. I can hear you perfectly. Okay, so how is my future son-in-law? It's time to get ready. The ceremony starts in half an hour. Valentina, don't get upset. Ernesto hasn't shown up yet, maybe something happened on the way. Call him and hurry him up. I've called several times, but he's not answering. Valentina hung up and leaned against the wall to steady herself. From her expression, Bruna understood that something terrible had happened. The bride started shaking her mother. Mama, tell me, don't be silent. What happened? Is something wrong with Ernesto? I don't know, but he hasn't shown up, he's disappeared somewhere. Bruna grabbed her mobile phone and tried calling Ernesto, but his phone was switched off. The bride and guests waited for the missing groom throughout the evening, but he never appeared. Bruna's classmates tried to console her, and closer to midnight, they rushed to the station. Bruna, forgive us, but maybe there's no point in waiting. We need to catch the last train, or we'll have to spend the night in the woods. The girl was in a state of shock and simply nodded. The rest of the guests followed the young people and left. The snacks and drink bottles were left untouched on the tables, and the waiters awaited further instructions from the restaurant manager, who kept running between the kitchen and the hall. After another half hour, the performers also rushed home, but not before demanding their fee. Valentina, we need to be paid, even though we didn't do anything. We were here the whole evening. It's not our fault. We wasted our time, and according to the contract, you have to pay us. After a brief argument, Valentina settled with the performers. She then faced similar demands from the restaurant manager, and Michaela tried to resolve the situation. What payment are you asking for when everything is intact? Woman, are you out of your mind? What am I supposed to do with all this now? Pay up and take everything with you. The friends silently unpacked the food and bottles from their bags. They overheard the restaurant workers lively discussing a cancelled wedding. The conversation was accompanied by jokes and loud laughter. In my life, there was a time when the bride ran away. But to have the groom do it, that's a first. I guess the guy wanted to make up for lost time before the wedding and got lost in someone else's bed. This version was confirmed a few days later when Ernesto appeared before his mother with his head down. Michaela rushed at her son. What have you done? You've brought shame upon us in the whole neighborhood. We can't even step outside during the day, everyone's laughing at us. Ernesto tried to justify his outrageous actions. Mom, you see, it all happened spontaneously. I didn't want to do that, but I had to. I don't want to hear your nonsense. What could have happened that made you not show up to your own wedding? If you changed your mind about getting married, you could have at least informed everyone like a decent person. Do you even realize what Bruna is going through right now? No, Mom, I can't imagine. But I'll try to explain everything to her. She'll understand me and forgive me. What do you want to explain to a jilted bride? That you had a change of heart half an hour before the registration? Mom, it's not exactly like that. You see, I was seeing another girl. There was nothing serious between us, but on the advice of my friends, I decided to have a bachelor party. We all drank too much, and Felicita helped me leave the bar. I don't remember what happened next, I just woke up at Felicita's place. Ernesto fell silent, lowering his eyes. Michaela demanded, "Why did you stop? Come on, tell me about your escapades. What was it like at that girl's house?" "Mom, Felicita is a decent girl. She doesn't deserve your insults. Decent girls don't sleep with someone else's husbands to be. Essentially, you and Bruna were already a couple, just waiting to get married. And you went after another woman." "Mom, it's not exactly like that. I don't remember anything. I only came to my senses when Lorenzo barged into the room the next morning." "Is he her father?" "Yes. I told them we didn't do anything, but he threatened to bury me alive if I didn't marry his daughter." Michaela slumped at the table and burst into tears. "What a disgrace. How am I supposed to face Valentina and Bruna now?" Her son tried to console her. "I'll talk to Aunt Valentina. They won't let you in after this, and they're right." "I'll still try." Ernesto left but soon returned. "Mom, they're not there. The neighbors said they left somewhere yesterday." Raisa wiped her tears. "How can they just leave? This can't be." She dialed her friend's number, but before she could say anything, Valentina shouted on the other end, "Michaela, don't call me ever again. Don't try to find me." After these words, the call ended abruptly. The woman made a few more unsuccessful attempts to reach her friend, then said in a faint voice, "Well, son, you did a great job. Now I have no friends left." Ernesto threw himself at his mother's feet. "Mom, I'm marrying Felicita. She's a good girl and her father is influential. He holds the majority stake in our factory and promised me a good position." Michaela said through gritted teeth, "Do as you wish." The mother and grandmother didn't attend Ernesto's wedding, so the newlyweds themselves paid them a visit one day. However, they received a cold reception. Later, Michaela distanced herself slightly and even visited her son's house once, where she met the prospective father-in-law, Lorenzo, who spoke highly of Ernesto. This, too, helped improve their new family ties. During dinner, the bride's father enthusiastically shared his plans for the future. "I became a widower early, so I raised my daughter in tough conditions, like a boy. I always wanted to have a son. And your Ernesto fully meets my expectations of a worthy heir." No, I'm not exaggerating, Michaela. I have been observing this young man for a long time. And when Felicita told me they were getting married, I was delighted." The guest listened to the businessman and shifted her gaze between her son and the host of the house. After all, Ernesto was telling her a completely different story. However, Lorenzo paid no attention to the woman's confusion and continued his narrative. "If Ernesto listens to me in everything, I will hand over the business to him in a couple of years. And I'll head to sunny Italy. I have a villa right on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. By the way, I'd like to invite you there too for a vacation. Believe me, it's such picturesque places." After spending a few hours at the house, Michaela lost the ability to think clearly. Everything seemed as artificial as the host's sweet talk. She hurried home, promising the prospective father-in-law to visit more often. Rosalia eagerly awaited her daughter's return. "Michaela, how was your future father-in-law?" "Not good. He brought it upon himself, no one forced him into this situation." Rosalia didn't say anything, but later that night, she started feeling unwell. Michaela called an ambulance, but the doctors sadly remarked, "Your mother has passed away. It would have been better if you had worried a little earlier." "How earlier?" "Everything was fine, and she didn't complain about anything." "It seems your mother didn't like to see doctors, and the illness dealt a fatal blow unexpectedly. Unfortunately, this happens much more often than we'd like." Ernesto didn't come to his grandmother's funeral. He apologized over the phone for a long time. "Mom, I'm sorry. Felicita and I are in Italy right now, we just arrived yesterday. Even if I wanted to, I can't come quickly. So please forgive me, don't be upset. There's nothing I can do now anyway." "It's okay, son, don't worry, enjoy your vacation." Michaela broke down in tears. They were tears of resentment for her failed personal happiness and wounded maternal feelings. I'm all alone now. I don't even have anyone to just vent to. My son even took away my only friend. My only hope is that at least my daughter won't surprise me. But Michaela was mistaken again. Indeed, Samantha didn't immediately burden her mother with her own mistakes. She allowed her mother to take a break. The girl entered the pedagogical university without any problems, but by the second year, she married a guy who was studying with her. A year later, the happy grandmother took care of her grandson. However, her daughter quickly lost interest in her studies. Moreover, not everything was smooth in the young family. One night, Michaela was awakened by a phone call. Samantha was sobbing, and little Francis was crying somewhere nearby. Worried, the mother shouted, "Sweetie, what's going on over there?" "Lucas left me. He said that both Francis and I were too much for him. I told you not to rush into marriage, but you didn't want to listen. Mom, I'm already feeling bad, and you're just nagging at me. Calm down. I'll come to you in the morning." The next 2 years passed in endless travels between the regional center and the settlement. With great difficulty, Michaela persuaded her daughter not to give up on her studies. "Think about it yourself, where would you go with an unfinished degree? But with a diploma, you can get a job in a kindergarten, and Francis will be with you." Samantha switched to part-time studies and, following her mother's advice, got a job in a daycare. During her exam sessions, Michaela took care of Francis. Thus, 2 years flew by. Now, Samantha often thanked her mother. "Mom, if it weren't for you, I would have made another mistake. Now I have something stable in my life." It's 5:30, almost morning. "I'll try to call Valentina." Her friend answered after the second ring. "Michaela, is that you?" "Yes, Valentina." "Hello, we heard about your misfortune. Hang in there." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but the woman paid no attention to them. "I'm trying, but it's not working." "Michaela, are you crying?" "Yes, my friend, I am. I'm sitting at the train station and crying." "Wait, what are you doing at the train station? Are you planning to visit your son?" A lump formed in the woman's throat. "Valentina, Ernesto kicked me out. You know, right now, I have only one wish, to leave this world." "Hey, don't you dare. Come to us with Bruna. We'll figure something out together." Valentina dictated the address of their new residence twice and demanded that her friend repeat it. "We're waiting for you, I'll be there to meet you." After the conversation with her friend, the heavy burden on the unhappy woman's heart eased a little, but tears continued to flow warmly down her cheeks. She didn't yet know what lay ahead, and hope for something bright was dwindling. Michaela thinly sliced the apples and carefully arranged the slices on a baking sheet. 9-year-old Nicola watched the process with admiration for some time, then started asking, "Grandma Michaela, can I try?" "No, my dear, the knife is sharp, and you might hurt yourself. Besides, it requires a special skill. See how thin I'm cutting? You won't be able to do it like this." The boy started to whine. Michaela finished slicing and asked the boy, "Nicola, if you really want to help me, bring some cheesecloth from the room. It's on the coffee table, those little mesh cloths. We'll cover our slices with it and leave them in the sun. In winter, we'll make compote. Are you not leaving? Do you want me to stay? I like having 2 grandmas now." The boy took one baking sheet covered with cheesecloth and carried it to the yard. Michaela watched her grandson and hummed to herself. Her singing was interrupted by Valentina's unexpected appearance. "Singing again, huh? It's good when there's music in your soul. Listen, friend, I didn't park the car in the garage. How about we take a ride to the farm? I need your advice. You know more about poultry farming than I do. You even finished those courses." "When was that?" Michaela asked. "Don't be modest. Ever since you came, our farm has been thriving. Valentina caught Nicola, who was heading for the second baking sheet.
Ah,
You're our little helper. Do you want to ride to the farm with us? And then we'll visit your mommy. The boy jumped with joy.
yay!
I'll play with the baby turkeys. The farm, which the mother and daughter organized 7 years ago, wasn't far to travel. Michaela watched her friend skillfully maneuvering on the country road. Valentina, I've been living here for 5 years now, but I can't get used to the fact that you drive the car yourself. Don't you trust me? Well, then you have only one option: learn to drive yourself. No, I'm not that much of a thrill seeker like you. Michaela didn't immediately realize that the phone call from the train station had, figuratively speaking, saved her from certain doom. Not directly, but symbolically. Perhaps she would have found temporary refuge or returned to her native village, where she would have lived out her days in sadness. In a moment of despair, she decided to call the one person who turned out to be even closer to her than her own son. When Michaela reached the bus stop, it was already noon. No one was around, and she thought, where is Valentina? Maybe she decided to take revenge on me for what Ernesto did, and now I have nowhere to go. It's all forest around here. From the narrow platform, a beaten path led downward, and Michaela followed it. She had already covered a considerable distance when she heard a car horn behind her. The road was deserted, but she still stepped aside, scolding the driver of the car. Is the road not wide enough for you? But in response, she heard a familiar laugh. Michaela, where are you going? I told you to wait for me, and you rushed off through the snowdrifts. It snowed yesterday, and they don't always clear the roads here on time. That's why I was a little late. Michaela stared at her friend, but she couldn't recognize the Valentina she knew in this woman in an expensive fur coat. But what amazed her even more was the car. Valentina, where did you get all this? Maybe I accidentally stumbled into a parallel world, and you are a completely different Valentina? No, everything is correct. Get in the car, I'll tell you everything on the way. And in general, you're in for some surprises. Michaela cast a cautious glance at her friend. Valentina, you won't harm me, will you? Do you even have a driver's license? Do you want me to show you, or will you take my word for it? All right, you convinced me. During the 20-minute drive, Valentina managed to tell her friend briefly about the twists and turns of her own life. My uncle used to live here, but then he passed away. The village used to be bigger, but after the restructuring, everyone scattered in search of work and a better life. My uncle's house was almost falling apart, but it was much safer for Bruna and me to stay here than become a laughingstock in the village. But you left so abruptly without even warning anyone. It's as if I was to blame for everything. Do you know how hard it was for me then? I think Bruna and I had it much worse. But I never blamed you even then. It was all like a dream. Some other circumstances emerged, and Bruna and I had to flee hastily. We didn't come here immediately. We stayed with the owner of the salon. Remember I told you about her? She took us in. We lived with her for almost a year, but Aurora, that was our benefactor's name, was seriously ill, something with her kidneys. She had to go to the hospital for some procedure every month. Probably hemodialysis? Yes, that procedure. But the treatment didn't help Aurora. She knew what awaited her and asked Bruna and me to take care of her husband and the salon after she was gone. In short, we stayed. And a year later, we reunited with Oscar. He's a very decent man. And I'm happy that I finally got to experience real happiness in the end. You're lucky. What about my son's reaction to my visit? He'll be fine, I've already prepared him. In our family, everything is based on mutual consent. Oscar and I mostly live on the farm. We renovated my uncle's house, or rather, built a new one in its place. We have our own farm, we breed turkeys and chickens, and we supply environmentally friendly products. Bruna stayed in the city. By the way, how is she? You didn't say anything about Bruna. She's doing well, or almost well. You'll see for yourself, and you'll understand. The car stopped in front of a two-story house, and Michaela gasped. Wow, what a house. I wonder how you could afford all this. Don't worry, it's all our own. Is it possible to earn that much money in just a few years? It's possible if you try. But let's not dwell on the past. All we need now is you telling me why you ran away from home. Michaela nervously followed the hostess into the house and was taken aback when a fair-haired boy of 5 ran towards Valentina. Grandma, I'm so glad you're here. I've been waiting for you, he exclaimed. Valentina hugged her grandson. Nicola, come and say hello to Grandma Michaela. The little boy extended his hand to the guest and introduced himself like a grown-up. I'm Nicola. Michaela clasped the child's tiny hand in hers and whispered, he looks so much like Ernesto, a spitting image. Now I understand, Valentina. Why didn't you tell me before? What would that have changed? Could it have made any difference back then? Did Ernesto know that Bruna was expecting a child? She didn't get a chance to tell him, she wanted to surprise him on their wedding day. But, as you know, things took a different turn. She should have told him afterward, maybe he would have reconsidered marrying someone else? There's no point in stirring up the past now. Nicola has everything he needs. We love and spoil him, and his grandfather adores him. Michaela, we have no desire to change anything. Why don't you tell me what made you run away from home? Michaela recounted how she felt lonely and tried to reason with her son. She shared her distress with her friend and told her about her last visit to her son. Valentina was so engrossed in the story that she didn't notice Bruna entering the house. When the guest finished her tale, the young woman spoke with pain in her voice. How low he has fallen. Well, he treated me the same way. But to kick your own mother out the door, it's terrible. After those words, Michaela burst into tears again, while Valentina and Bruna tried to comfort her. Live with us, after all, we're family now. You'll settle in, get used to it. Maybe then you'll find a purpose for your talents. Adapting to her new surroundings was brief. The next day, Michaela declared, if you don't mind, I'll take care of Nicola. In fact, you can give me any task. Michaela quickly adapted to her new life, but deep down, the resentment towards her son remained like a splinter. In the first month, Ernesto tried calling her, but she refused to answer his calls. Eventually, her son seemed to disappear from her life entirely. Ernesto was driving at a minimum speed on a busy road. An unclear sense of unease struck him roughly around midday. By evening, the discomfort intensified, and he didn't want to stay overnight in a foreign city. He also didn't bother to inform Felicita about his return, as they had a heated argument again before his trip. Over the past year, he had often wondered, how long will I endure all of this? But he found no answer. He was afraid to admit to himself that he had been demeaning himself for the illusion of well-being for many years. Lorenzo had appointed him head of the design department, but that was the extent of his career growth. Once, Ernesto hinted that he deserved a promotion, considering his experience. But Lorenzo quickly put him in his place. You're not mature enough to make such demands. Another person in your position would be happy with what they have. Ernesto attempted to influence Lorenzo through Felicita, but she also shut him down. Ernesto, I don't understand what more you want. At that moment, he wanted to tell his wife that he longed for ordinary female attention. He wasn't content with their distant family life, with each person living their own life. He had initially accepted it during the early years of their marriage, thinking that things would improve over time, especially when they had children. But Felicita didn't want to hear about having children. Ernesto, children? Look at what's happening in the world. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Besides, you never even asked me if I wanted them. By the tone with which Felicita expressed herself, Ernesto understood that motherhood did not attract her, and there was no way to change that situation. One day, Ernesto casually brought up the topic of a possible divorce. Calmly, his wife replied, Ernesto, go ahead and divorce now, but remember that you'll leave here with nothing. Ernesto considered this rude remark from his wife to be a joke. Felicita, what are you saying? Have I earned nothing in almost 10 years of our life together? She scrutinized him critically from head to toe. Maybe you earned enough for 2 pairs of socks. But that's all thanks to my father. So, you mean to say that I'm worthless and incapable of anything? But unlike you, I at least finished college, while you spent your youth partying. Felicita knew how to hold her ground. Ernesto, you know what sets us apart? No? Let me tell you. We come from different backgrounds. Even if you try very hard, you'll always be that scared little boy from the village who naively believed in miracles. But miracles don't exist. They only exist in fairy tales. After that humiliating exchange, Ernesto wanted to slam the door loudly and leave far away. But he immediately remembered that he couldn't leave since both cars parked in the garage were registered in his wife's name. He didn't even have his own bank card because his father-in-law managed to convince him to open a joint family account. I'm to blame myself for becoming a slave to this couple. Felicita is right, if I decide to divorce her, I'll have to leave with nothing. He remembered what he had done several years ago. My life could have been so different if I hadn't fallen for Felicita and her father's bait. With these thoughts in mind, he reached his floor and, trying not to make any noise, opened the apartment door. Silence filled the place, but strange sounds were coming from the bedroom. He tiptoed down the corridor and froze on the spot when he understood the nature of those sounds. Ernesto kicked the door with all his strength. It was decorated with glass mosaics. The glass shattered with a clang, and 2 bodies froze in fear on the bed. Felicita was the first to recover her composure. What do you think you're doing? Why didn't you let me know you were coming today? Why should I have to inform you? In 2 leaps, Ernesto covered the distance from the door to the bed and slapped his wife with all his might. Felicita screamed loudly, I'll never forgive you for this. Shut up. The wife's lover tried to find his belongings on the floor, but Ernesto wouldn't allow him. He dragged the skinny guy with a fashionable beard to the center of the room and punched him. Now get out of here, Ernesto said. The guy was trembling but managed to struggle. While Ernesto was pulling him towards the exit, opening the apartment door, the man pushed him onto the staircase landing and slammed the door shut. Felicita had already put on a robe. She ran around the apartment with disheveled hair, shouting, Do you even know who he is? And why do you have to create these scenes? I'm a free woman, and I want to love whomever I desire. Love whomever you want, but I've had enough. I won't put up with this, Ernesto replied. The deceived husband grabbed the travel bag left in the hallway and slammed the door. Felicita followed him. Give me the car keys. You're nobody. You're just an empty space, not a real man. No decent girl would want to be with you. Ernesto rushed down the stairs while curses and insults chased after him. My dad will make you pay. No respectable company will ever accept you. Ernesto stormed out onto the street and took a deep breath of fresh air. A wild thought crossed his mind to use the car. He quickly dismissed it and started walking along the street, humming his mother's favorite song under his breath. Passers-by gave him suspicious looks, but he paid no attention to those glances because he felt light and relieved inside. Determinedly, Ernesto headed for a bar. He drowned his sorrows and bitterness in alcohol all night long. He confided his misfortune to a random companion at the bar, who invited him to stay overnight at his place. The next morning, Ernesto woke up in a stranger's apartment to the insistent ringing of his cell phone. His head was pounding, and his mouth felt dry. But the phone kept on signaling. It was his father-in-law calling. Without any preamble, he attacked his son-in-law. What do you think you're doing? Lorenzo, can you calm down a bit? His father-in-law shouted, Are you mocking me? Well, my dear son-in-law, you are no longer employed in my company. I promise you I'll make your life miserable. Ernesto turned off the phone. From the kitchen, his former colleague appeared, trying to carry 2 cups of coffee with trembling hands. Here, my friend, a refreshing drink. I'm not a big fan of strong spirits, and I don't advise you to indulge either. Well, I'm not really into hard drinks, it was just a reason yesterday. The man asked sympathetically, did your wife cheat on you? Caught her in the act? Caught her red-handed, right in the midst of it. I'd definitely lose it if my wife pulled such a stunt on me, but she left me herself. Ernesto stumbled out onto the street and took in a lungful of fresh air. It dawned on him that he hadn't even asked for the name of the person whose apartment he stayed in last night. That wasn't very considerate. He chuckled at the thought that he could have been pickpocketed. Remembering about money, Ernesto hurried to the nearest ATM, only to find that his card was blocked. He had a small sum of money hidden in his travel bag, so he decided to continue the bachelor celebration he started the night before. What happened next was a blur of fragments of other people's conversations and unfamiliar faces. Ernesto vividly remembered taking a train or maybe a subway somewhere. He woke up with a terrible headache, barely had time to come to his senses before grabbing his head with both hands. His fingers felt something sticky, and when he opened his eyes, it was blood. Ernesto took a slow look around. He found himself in some desolate place, with city or village lights twinkling in the distance. He sat against a wall, searching for his bag. Perhaps there would be something to drink inside. He distinctly recalled buying some drink for a toast yesterday, but the bag was nowhere to be found. How could he lose it? It contained all his belongings. He got on all fours, trying to stop the dizziness. When his vision cleared a bit, he carefully scanned the area again. Ernesto sat back down. Okay, he needed to try to remember where he came from. Maybe he could figure out where he dropped the bag. He started from the moment he boarded the train. However, even that was hazy in his memory. Remembering where he had arrived and what happened afterward seemed like an impossible task. Although, he vaguely recalled some faces, maybe he was drinking with someone, but it wasn't clear. Suddenly, a cold sweat ran down his back. He quickly reached for his chest pocket, where he kept his money and documents, almost screaming in horror. All the pockets were turned inside out. They had hit him over the head and took everything of value. Ernesto raised his hand to check the time, but he smirked sadly at the realization that his watch was gone too. Ernesto sat there for a while until the sky started to lighten, then he got up on his feet. No matter how long he stayed here, nothing would change. He had indeed marked the end of his married life quite well. Felicita turned out to be right. He was practically left with nothing. Before, he at least had his documents, but now, he was just a nobody. He could try to get them replaced, but whenever Ernesto pictured Felicita's triumphant face, he lost all motivation to take any action. He picked up a random stick and headed towards the distant lights. He needed to get there and figure out what to do next. He was extremely thirsty, so much so that he felt nauseated. When he spotted a water fountain on the outskirts, he almost cried with joy. Ernesto rushed to it but was interrupted by a voice behind him. Would have been nice if these drunks carried some dishes with them. Disgusting to drink water from this fountain after them, an old lady muttered. Ernesto turned around. Hello, ma'am. I apologize if I disturbed you. I'm not a drunk, but I was hit on the head yesterday and can't remember what happened. My documents and bag were stolen. Could you tell me which city is this? Oh, look at you, acting all dramatic. Each day brings a new character, and stories don't seem to repeat, she retorted, then turned and walked away. Ernesto was perplexed as he watched her leave. He checked himself and even lost the desire to drink. His clothes were dirty, torn in places, and his jacket looked unrecognizable. Even he himself, with his hair caked with blood and dirt, looked like a mess. He let out a sigh and splashed his head with cold water. It instantly cleared his head a bit, but it also made him realize that he was soaked and possibly getting a fever. He didn't know how long he walked. Maybe 2 or even 3 hours. It didn't seem too far, but every step was becoming more and more difficult. He never imagined it could be this way. Just 2 days ago, he was driving around the city in his expensive suit and car. And now. Now he was worse off than a homeless person. At least they know where they can find some relief or food. Suddenly, a train station appeared ahead. It brought some relief to Ernesto. He quickened his pace. From the station, he could reach one of his acquaintances. He'd explain that he was robbed. Although, he guessed that everyone probably knew what happened to him, and no one would want to ruin their life by helping him. Ernesto struggled to climb onto the platform. He looked around in surprise. It was some unfamiliar station. Although he didn't frequent train stations in his city, he would have recognized his own. He glanced at a signboard. Why the sigh? Had a good time yesterday, but today not so much, a cheerful voice spoke up. The voice seemed oblivious to Ernesto's condition, and he turned around in annoyance. Before him stood a vivid representative of the homeless, with a dirty jacket, a black eye, and missing front teeth. What are you staring at? Do you like what you see? Well, you don't look great either. Haven't seen you around here. If you want, I can keep you warm, and I have something to drink too. Ernesto felt sick to his stomach. He was already feeling terrible, and the lady's words immediately conjured up several scenarios of possible events in his mind. Thank you, I don't need anything, he replied and turned away, hurrying towards the station building. The lady, apparently offended, shouted after him, "You'll regret it later," begging for help, but I won't agree. Ernesto entered the station and closed the door behind him. Inside, he overheard a conversation. "Bruna, when will you come back?" "I'll try to come tomorrow, Mom." "Well, take your time. We can handle things here if needed." Bruna was going to the city for shopping. She needed to buy medication for the birds and some feed. She always took the train because the service had finally reached their town after the renovation. Plus, she needed to visit home. She had been spending too much time on the farm lately. It was almost as if she was magnetically drawn there. While Michaela was around, Bruna loved spending time there and didn't want to leave. But now, she tried not to show it, yet every mention of Ernesto caught her attention. It was a pity that Michaela hardly ever talked about her son. She barely mentioned her daughter either. Although Samantha called her periodically, it was only to ask for money. Surprisingly, she never asked where her mother settled after the fire. Michaela didn't try to explain either. As it turned out, life was peaceful when you didn't have adult children around. Bruna arrived at the station and decided to visit the station buffet. Her mom always scolded her for it, but the station pastries had been her weakness since childhood. Valentina would always reprimand her, saying, "You have no idea what they put in those pastries. How can you even eat them? You're almost a medical professional, don't you understand that?" Bruna chuckled, "I understand, Mom, but when I see those pastries, some kind of beast wakes up inside me." Now, Bruna was in a hurry to get to the station buffet. "Hello, I'd like 3 cabbage pastries, 3 jam-filled, and 3 with meat." She heard some rustling behind her and a hoarse voice. "Excuse me, miss, I got robbed, and they left me with nothing. Could you buy me a pastry?" Bruna showed the vendor 3 fingers, and she quickly put 3 pastries into a separate bag. Bruna took it, handed it to the homeless person, and finally looked at him. "God, Ernesto." The man stared at her for a moment, then whispered, "Bruna." He started to lean to the side, and Bruna barely caught him. The vendor rushed to help her. "Do you know him?" she asked. "Yes, but I don't understand why he looks like this. He used to be quite successful. Someone really did a number on him. Looks like he has a fever. But even if we call an ambulance, I doubt they'll take him. And even if they do, who knows if they'll help him. Our doctors nowadays are well-mannered. They don't like dealing with dirty and poor people." Brune was completely flustered. She knew the woman was right. "Listen, maybe there's a medic here? You know, sometimes there are medics at the station. I'll pay them," she suggested. "There is one." "How could there not be?" "Let's take him to the back room, and I'll call him," the vendor said. Ernesto was starting to come to his senses. He was mumbling something to himself. The vendor smiled. Is he singing? Seems like he's sober. Bruna leaned closer and clearly heard a familiar song. She smiled. Michaela used to sing this song almost every day. The local medic turned out to be a big man. He came with a medical bag and professionally treated and bandaged Ernesto's head. Bruna looked at Ernesto. What are you doing here? He smirked sadly. A long and boring story. It's my fault. In the end, I ended up in a place from which no one returns. Bruna narrowed her eyes. In a way, you're right. You deserved all this, not just because you treated me and my mother like dirt. Did you see my mom? Where is she? How? I called her back then, but she didn't answer. But why am I even trying to justify myself? You're right, you said it all correctly, I deserved it. Yesterday I was so sure that I was really cool and respected, and today I find myself under a fence, completely useless to anyone. Ernesto sighed, and Bruna felt sorry for him. Okay, we'll figure out everything later. Can you walk? She asked. I guess I can. But where? And more importantly, why? He replied. Let's go to my place. You can clean up, and I'll find you some clothes. And what about your husband? That's not your concern anymore. Bruna suddenly became angry with herself. How many times had she imagined this meeting in her dreams? She wanted to slap Ernesto, walk past him with pride, not recognizing him. But reality turned out to be completely different. They managed to persuade the third taxi driver to take them. He disapproved of Ernesto throughout the ride and, when they were getting out, he said to Bruna, "You're such a beautiful girl. Why do you need this mess? Such people never change, they'll be wandering around the streets all their lives. Pity you." Only later did Bruna realize that the taxi driver assumed Ernesto was her husband and simply pitied her. While Ernesto was soaking in the bath, Bruna prepared some food. The choice was limited because she hadn't been to the store recently. But she found some frozen cutlets in the freezer and a piece of cheese in the fridge. Then, to her surprise, she found 5 potatoes in the vegetable box. When Ernesto came out of the bath, he was almost salivating. It was only now that he remembered it had been 3 days since he last ate. He cautiously ate the food and avoided eye contact with Bruna. But eventually, the plate emptied, and he knew it would. How have you been, Bruna? He asked. I've been living well. And you? What happened to you? Bruna replied. Ernesto straightened up, pushed the plate away, and began to speak. I've never liked how we all lived there. I dreamed of living differently at any cost. I wanted it so badly that I was ready to ignore everyone, you, my mother, everyone. Felicita, my wife, understood it all from the very beginning. And she knew about my arranged marriage. At that moment, we decided that we should get married, and if I had any guilt left, her father dispelled it in the morning. Ernesto pensively tapped his fingers on the table. I forced myself not to think about anything, not to remember anything. You often appeared in my dreams, my mother appeared too, but I pretended everything was fine and that I had achieved everything I wanted. Turns out I achieved nothing. Bruna listened, realizing that Ernesto had already punished himself enough, and yet she couldn't hold back. Oh, Ernesto. Well, I'm practically a stranger to you, but my mother. How could you do that to her? You knew perfectly well that she had nowhere to go, that she had no home left. He lowered his head. You're right, there's no forgiveness for me. Then he looked at her. Since you know what happened, you've seen my mother. How is she? I told you already, she's doing great. Do you know where she is now? Of course, I do. Would you like to see her? I really want to. I understand she might not forgive me, but I need to apologize. Bruna thought for a moment and then said, I'll take you to her. It's time to surprise you. What do you mean? Let's wait until tomorrow, and you'll find out. Spite of Ernesto's expectations, he hardly slept at all that night. Whenever he managed to doze off, he would open his eyes again and spend the rest of the night staring at the ceiling. A familiar melody kept playing in his mind, and he couldn't help but smile softly. He knew that smiling in his current situation might seem foolish, but he couldn't stop. Even if his mother were to send him away tomorrow, he would still ask for her forgiveness. In the morning, Bruna told him she had some errands to run and that he should stay at home. "I'll be back, and we'll leave right away," she said. "Is it far?" Ernesto asked. "No, not too far. It's about an hour's drive, maybe even less." While she was away, he explored her apartment. It seemed that Bruna was living quite well. However, no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find any traces of a man living there. He chuckled to himself. He sighed and lay down, and sleep slowly overcame him. "Michaela, did you prepare the salad?" he heard Bruna's voice. "Yes," Michaela replied. The friends were in good spirits. Bruna told them that she wouldn't be coming alone, which meant she finally had a date. After Ernesto left her, she hadn't entered into any relationships. Valentina understood that despite everything, Bruna still loved Ernesto. Michaela, on the other hand, thought differently. She believed that after what Ernesto had done, Bruna shouldn't love him and assumed that Bruna's feelings were just ordinary female resentment towards men. But regardless of their views, they both wished happiness for Bruna, just like her own mother. Valentina sat down. "Michaela, what do you think he's like?" Michaela waved her hand. "Oh, Valentina, what does it matter? As long as he loves Bruna, as long as she likes him." Valentina stood up. Michaela looked out the window. "Look, it's Bruna's car. Go meet her. I'll finish up here." Michaela listened to the quietness outside, as if no one was talking. She even wondered if Bruna's chosen partner might be mute. Could they be communicating through gestures? But then, she heard Ernesto's voice. "Hello, Mom." Michaela dropped the plate she was holding and turned slowly. She struggled to compose herself, trying not to rush towards her son and embrace him immediately. "Hello, Ernesto. Why did you come here?" she asked. Ernesto lowered his head, still hoping for a somewhat warmer reception. "Well, Bruna asked me to come and ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness? What about your wife? Is she aware of this?" Michaela inquired. "Mom, we don't live together anymore. She kicked me out," he said with a wry smile. "Bruna found me almost under a fence, with a head injury, dirty, and penniless. When I had everything, I didn't need anyone. But when I was left on the street, I remembered everyone. I understand that you won't forgive me. I wouldn't be able to forgive myself either. But you know, I regret that incident more than anything. I apologize, Mom." Ernesto turned around and reached for the doorknob. However, Michaela exclaimed, "Wait. Let me at least hug you." Valentina had been pacing back and forth, biting her lips. Ernesto understood her feelings and didn't even attempt to speak. They sat on the couch and talked. Valentina, although she felt some pity for him, didn't show it openly. She could see the sparkle in her daughter's eyes, and part of her wanted to say, "Once a betrayer, always a betrayer." But she held her tongue. As they were about to sit down for a meal, the door burst open, and Nicola rushed into the house. "Grandma's. You won't believe what Grandpa and I did." Valentina and Michaela immediately broke into smiles. "What did you do?" they asked. "We went fishing," Nicola proudly declared. "Fishing, and did you catch anything?" Michaela asked. "Yes, I caught 3 fish." "And where are the fish now?" "I released them." "I felt sorry for them," Nicola replied with a smile. Ernesto stared at the boy with wide eyes. Bruna noticed his gaze and sighed. "Meet Ernesto. This is Nicola," she said. Ernesto looked up at her. "What a fool I've been," he exclaimed. And then something unexpected happened. Ernesto started crying. Nicola looked at his mother, frightened. "Mama, why is the man crying?" he asked. "It's tears of joy, sweetie. And he's not just any man, he's your father," Bruna replied. Bruna herself was close to tears, and Valentina wiped her eyes. Meanwhile, Ernesto continued to look at Nicola. "Hello, son. I never imagined you existed," Ernesto said. 3 months passed. Bruna helped Ernesto restore his documents, and he took his wife to court. He told Bruna, "I know I won't win anything, but maybe it's just my bad character, at least I'll ruffle some feathers." Bruna chuckled. "Your character is not the issue here," Ernesto said, looking closely at her. "Bruna, I hurt you so deeply, and you shouldn't even have to talk to me. Yet, you're trying to justify my actions." "Why?" he questioned. Bruna shrugged. "Maybe because my love is much stronger than the hurt. I keep telling myself I should hate you, but I can't manage to do it." Ernesto gently pulled her closer. "Bruna, what if I ask for another chance? The one I didn't take when I could have been happy." She looked at him seriously. "And I'll believe you again." In the evening, after work, Ernesto, who had become an indispensable person on their farm, stood up. "Valentina, may I address you?" he asked. The woman sighed. Of course, she knew what she was about to hear. Bruna looked down, Nicola sat in anticipation, and Michaela gave her son a stern look. "Valentina, I understand that you'd rather see me as your son-in-law the least, but I'm asking for your daughter's hand again. I was an idiot. All this time, I remembered and loved Bruna, and she loved me. Allow me to prove to you that I can be different," Ernesto spoke with emotion. Valentina silently waved her hand and wiped her eyes. In a surge of emotions, Ernesto embraced her. Later, when they all sat around the table, everyone went outside. The evening was calm and pleasant. Valentina and Bruna went somewhere, and Michaela approached her son closely. "Listen, Ernesto, I'll tell you this. You've dishonored the girl, her mother, and you made the child grow up without a father. Ultimately, you hurt me too. I want you to know that if you dare hurt Bruna again, I'll personally take you down," Michaela warned. Ernesto looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Mom, I won't allow you to go to jail because of me. And don't even think of running away, because we're counting on at least 1, maybe even 2 more children." Michaela leaned her head on her son's shoulder. In this very moment, she wished time could stand still, because her heart felt so full. It was a feeling unlike any she had ever experienced before.
An amazing story, isn't it? Thank you for listening till the end. I sincerely hope that you truly enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate this video. See you in the comments and in new releases.